All right. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
A lot of familiar faces, so thanks for being here. This is really fun. So, given the circumstances, we're just going to have fun with it. So we might play it a little audible and ask you all to participate, ask for your thoughts. So if there's something that we cover and you're like, ooh, I have a lot of thoughts on that, we'll go with it. I won't get too far ahead before introducing our team. So I'm Josh, you all know me. This is Femi. We kind of started this whole shindig. Pastor Femi. We got Josh and Colton over there doing all the tech stuff. Take it down, gentlemen. And then we have our very handsome panelists up here. We've got Nick, who's the youth pastor at Eastbrook.
Hi.
He brought the snacks. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Nick.
We got Josh. He is the third grade teacher here at Eastbrook Academy. And we got Greg Phillips, who is the math extraordinaire at Heritage High School. So we got a bunch of we got a bunch of educators up here, a bunch of passionate people. So we're really thankful for you being here. Little spiel about what Parable Arrows is. So our brand is built on the idea of the parables that Jesus told. So the idea that stories carry us deeper and challenge us to think through things in a creative way. And then arrows, which are a thing that when they are fired, they are aiming for a very specific point. So when we have other kinds of projectiles, usually they're not as accurate, but with an arrow, you're trying to be precise. So with a parable arrow, we're trying to engage with stories and talk about stories in a way that is going directly to the heart, that we're trying to get people to think deeper about their souls, about how they connect to each other, God, and the world. So that is a little bit about us. What you can expect, so we've got about 3 parts. We're going to start by just kind of running through some little sessions that we're going to have, so there's going to be some chances for you to come talk at your tables. We're going to have our intro, which is what is this whole theme of signal and noise, and what does that mean? We're going to talk about how Christians can kind of tend to handle signal and noise. And then we're going to have a discussion on how Jesus actually, through the scriptures, teaches us to handle noise. So we'll have a little intermission transition period because we got little ones who need to use the bathroom. We got old ones who also probably need to use the bathroom. Amen. And from there, we have a couple clips that we'll run through. So we do our podcast, which is the Parable Arrows podcast, where we talk about movies and analyze things. I've got Nick on a video podcast, Josh on a video podcast. You're coming up sometime at some point. I'll schedule with you. And from there, we'll just kind of go what happens. We do have some bags, so if we got some people who are fashionable and stylish, you can get a bag. There's a code on your table that you can give us some feedback. So we're thinking about, what can the future hold for us? What are some things that people would like in terms of content or material that we can produce as a team, have more voices like Greg, Josh, and Nick participate in to just get the word out and go from there. So what you can expect, so we're going to try and be on time. So I know we're starting later than we thought, so we're not going to belabor any points. We could talk ad nauseum for a lot of these things, so I hope that you continue the conversations in your own circles, that you take what you got here and you go out. Femi and I are really passionate about not being the experts. We want everyone else to become the experts. Like, we want you to become passionate about these things and to take them to your circles and get more people passionate about these things. We don't want to be the stopping point. Number 2, we're going to have our guests chime in at different portions. So when they have some thoughts, they're going to share it with us. So we're going to pass the mic around. We might go to you guys if you have any thoughts that you just want to share from your tables. Number 3, we are probably going to scratch the surface on a lot of things. This is going to be kind of an inspirational presentation, so don't be afraid to send us a question, contact us, find us during one of our breaks or during one of the open table talks. We're going to feature a turn-in talk, so that's where you're going to go at your tables so you can talk to each other and get your thoughts. Our break, and then we're going to practice our SMART outline. So what that is those sheets in front of you. That is just our formula that we use on our podcast. So when we watch, read, listen to anything, that's kind of our framework as a team that we're thinking through. So how do we summarize it? What's the message? Do I agree with the message? How can I rethink what I received? And how can I bring the Bible and Scripture into it to then bring it out and go talk to other people? So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Femi, who's going to talk about what is signal and what is noise.
Hey, thanks everybody for letting me talk. I like talking. It's nice. I really appreciate what we're trying to do, but we named this Signals and the Noise, and there's a reason for that. Signal, for those of people who are older than about maybe 35-ish, know that your TV, when you had a TV on, it's getting a signal usually through a wire. And if the screen is fuzzy, it'd have this thing like snow, right? That is what we would call noise. It's all the stuff that's not the signal you're trying to grab. And understanding that we live in a world in 2024 where media is coming at us in every single direction. It's every single different type of device that's being created, every single system has a way to get to you. Someone said if you're a parent and you're giving your kid a phone, you're not giving your kid access to the world through the phone, you're giving the world access to your kid. And so it's really important to think through what in all of that noise is a message that's coming out. Do I understand that message? Can I pull it apart and understand, do I actually agree with that or not? Or am I being bombarded in a way that is really harming me in a way that I can't understand, can't focus on? So a couple of examples of this are when I go to a Netflix homepage, when I go to a TikTok homepage, I'm seeing everything that is available to me. If I am not in a position to say, hey, I'm going to try to figure out what's there, I'm going to try to understand if this is something I agree with or don't. The way that the algorithms are built, the way that the people who are just trying to, again, probably put money in their pocket, food on the table for their family, just working their job, they are thinking through how do they keep you on the platform. That's all they really care about. And it's not because they want to hurt you or harm you, but the people who are creating those things and have those messages in them, if you're not aware of it, those signals, all of them, become noise. They distract you. They can cause anxiety. And there are a lot of negative impacts of not being aware in all of the noise of the signals that are coming to you. So that's the difference we're talking about when we're saying signal versus noise. It's a distraction. So you can go to the next slide, and we'll talk through some of what are these signals, noise, and so on. So I'll pass it back to Josh real quick for that.
All right, so if you see, we got a couple examples up here. At the top, I think, is an interesting one. So we have a sports talk show, and we have a news/political talk show. From your distance, it's kind of intentional, kind of unintentional. It's kind of hard to tell which is which. Obviously, I know we got some sports fans here and some news fans, so you can kind of pick out the colors and stuff like that, but we got similar colors, similar desk setup, similar people in similar attire. It looks pretty much the same. And on one level, people want to discuss, people want other people to, hear their opinions and their thoughts. That's one of the reasons that media is so potent, is we get to hear more voices. But now we're hearing all the voices that are well thought out, all the voices that are not well thought out, all the voices that are kind of figuring out where they land and, their thoughts in real time publicly. And so we get situations like this where we're building more and more and more and more places where sports is being talked about, news is being talked about, media is being talked about. This is a church, everyone's creating their thing, and it's all starting to kind of blend together and look the same, where it's almost indistinguishable. It's also impacting our church culture a little bit, where instead of having sermons necessarily about Ephesians, book studies, diving into really deep scripture analysis and context and looking at original Greek, all that good stuff to really help us understand the Hebrew text, we're kind of getting the relationship goals via blah, blah, blah book, We're going to talk about this book, but we're going to frame it in a way that is just like the media machine. We're going to mediafy it in a way that is going to make people enticed to want to pay attention, versus you should want to pay attention because this is good for you. And, it's kind of like a healthy food. We don't necessarily, we should like our Bibles as much as we like our broccoli, but sometimes that can be tricky. And so we're having this impact in our world where the distractions are starting to influence the things that we want to almost, I don't want to say keep sacred, but keep focused on the right things. And so instead of trying to copy and, scream into the void like everyone else is doing, we want to figure out, well, what's the tension that we hold? How do we do that? So some of that can also start to impact our lives, how we live. Are we wasting time on our phones scrolling? Are we watching a lot of shows? Are we, the side hustle thing? Are we all trying to build our own sports center and other entertainment? So where do we go from there? So this is going to be our first turn and talk. So this is going to be a chance for you to talk at your table. So some questions are, what do you think, based either on your personal opinion, what you think you're absorbing from the world, what is the purpose of modern media? What is it trying to do? And then do you personally struggle with a distraction mindset? Why? Why not? How so? And in a couple minutes, we'll bring it back together, maybe hear from some of you, and keep on going. All right, so we're going to come back up this way. So maybe I'm going to have maybe one of you guys, if you want to pick one of you to share one of your thoughts, and then I would love to hear just from each table if there's a representative that wants to really quick summarize, like what were some of the ideas or things that came out about this question of like, what do you think the role of modern media is today? Yeah, no, that's great. So to summarize back into the mic, so we had numbers game. We just want attention, so we have a story on a People magazine about, someone reaching over the aisle seat and closing the shade and that slightly annoyed the person. What is the actual purpose, like the impact and how deep it goes. And then I love the point too of tying those two things together of like too little to too much. I think it's an interesting distinction because I feel like when we look at history and why people love sharing their voice so much is because so many people weren't heard from. Like we have studied that in my class of like different voices of different ethnicities, different socioeconomic backgrounds, they weren't heard from, but now everybody's getting heard from. And it's like there has to be a middle ground, but we're not really trying to find it. We're just like, all right, well, this is the new norm, so like floodgates are open, like here we go. So awesome, thank you for sharing. This table, how about you? What were some thoughts? No, to follow up the distraction, anything being a distraction, like I have kids, teachers, I have kids who draw in class to not pay attention. Like it doesn't even need to be a phone, but like they just like will not be present at all. Like they will find anything to not be there and like be engaging with it. And then the noise factor, like, oh man, I'm guilty of walking around the house with my headphones in all the time. My wife is nodding, yes, in agreement. So awesome, so thanks for that. Let me see where we're at. Go to our next slide. All right, so now we're going to kind of step into the Christian sphere. So how do Christians tend to handle noise? So there's some strengths, I think, definitely, in Christian culture where we have actually been some of the voices to challenge, is this healthy or is this good for us? But in the same way that culture is providing so much media, we're going too crazy with it. And we're going so far into the like, well, now we just need to become basically Amish and like no technology, no anything, no movies, no whatever. And again, kind of like we were saying, we don't know if that's the right answer, is to be either all in or all out. And maybe there's a middle ground. So this is kind of some pros and cons. For all its faults and strengths and blessings, Focus on the Family has been an organization, that's done that. So this is not to throw any shade at them or to downplay what they have done. I know I used that a lot to convince my dad to go see movies that I was probably too young for, but we had good conversations, and this is one of the inspirations for that. But a quote that Femi added to our slides was this idea that there's this person who wrote Focus on the Family. This is back from 2007. And they were talking about how they're just being flooded with all this stuff. And so all of a sudden, Focus on the Family becomes the filter for them, which on one level, we're like, that's awesome. Thank you. Like you have to go watch these bad movies. You have to engage with all this nonsense. Like that is a sacrifice to engage and to filter and to do all that work. But it's Focus on the Family's job then to be the filter, not your own heart, not your own connection to God, not your own discipline to decide, is this actually healthy or right for me? You put up an organization that is now doing the filtering. And again, there's a strength to that. There's a necessity for that. But if all your muscle is built by someone else, you're not really lifting any weights. You're just tricking yourself into thinking you're lifting weights. So what do? We tend to bend into these habits where, we have timers. We check our, was mentioned earlier, how many hours am I spending on my phone a week? How many hours am I spending on a phone a day? I've used different tricks of, monitoring software for different content to keep accountability with friends and brothers in Christ. Sabbaths, do we have a no TV Sabbath? Do we do all this stuff? Physical habits, like do we leave phones in different rooms when we sleep? Do we not have a TV? There's all these ways that we can start building things that on the surface are really good. Like these are good habits. We don't want to be controlled by media. We don't want to be controlled by devices, distractions, whatever. But then now we have a list of like almost religious media consumption habits where if I don't do this, like, like shut down the TV now or else we're going to be staring at it for the next 10 hours. Like there's this panic and we're not able to deal with it. And so instead of building discipline of self-control, we're building a discipline of avoidance. We're building a discipline that makes us like walk out of the room or like be afraid or like, this isn't my normal setting and my phone isn't controlled. And, instead of being like, no, I know that I can say no to this. I know that I can turn this off right now. I have the self-control to watch this enough. 30 minutes in, it's getting too far. We can't do this and shut it off. I don't need focus on the family. I don't need a parent. I don't need a friend. I don't need my pastor. I don't need these people. They are a blessing to share those things with us, to give us wisdom. But I don't necessarily need it because I've built that muscle to do that myself. So in avoiding, one of the things that we run into is we don't get the chance to actually see how God, in his word and through the stories of the Bible, has actually used what we would consider like dangerous things to actually shape and to mold and encourage the world. So when we have something, for example, like a kitchen knife, they're sharp. They can cut you. They can send you to the emergency room. Sorry, that's, the wife says thumbs up. That definitely happened. So it is a dangerous tool. But with this dangerous tool, you can either hurt yourself or you can make an amazing meal that will bless people who are in your home. You can either choose to be like, well, we're just never going to make any food that never requires a kitchen knife. We're only going to use things that can be, are wrapped in plastic and whatever. We're only going to do things for whatever. And there is a wisdom in avoiding danger. Like, we shouldn't just, run into the street because, like, God's going to save me. Like, that's not a healthy mentality. But we also shouldn't be afraid that, like, this is a tool that can be used in good, strong, and healthy ways. It's just, are we using it in those ways? Or are we allowing this tool to become dangerous? So by using something like media, we can then start to see, like, oh, we're sharing experiences. We're hearing from different voices. We're deepening our conversations. I heard a ton of sports talk. Like, you guys most of you have never met each other. And immediately there was banter and people are laughing, all because you like different sports teams. Or I know this guy and you know this guy, and oh, do you remember this game back in the day? And there you go. And now we have a deepened connection and relationship through something that could become an idol, but in this instance, it brought you all together. And so it's how do we... I have the mic, Greg, so I'm trying to be good. I don't want to call people out, so I'm trying to be good. And as we do that, we reframe, and I think this is one of the things that has been lost in how Christians have responded to media culture, is we lose God's redemptive mission. If God is out to redeem everything, that includes media. That includes the stuff that is hurting us right now. It includes devices, it includes television shows, it includes movies and music and books and comics and all that stuff. That is in there. But we have to ask the hard question, what is the purpose of modern media? Is it fulfilling its purpose? Is it doing what we intended it to do? So this is going to be our next turn and talk. So thinking of that idea of like discipline, and specifically in this, like, how do I kind of rein in my habits and my choices and my decisions? How would you personally define discipline? And then specifically in terms of media and how we talked about the, focus on the family mindset versus feeling like I'm not really in control of my filters. What do you think is the difference between discipline built in peace or inspired by peace versus discipline that is built in fear or driven by fear? And what is the difference and how do we cultivate one and avoid the other? All right, cool. So this is kind of where things get interesting, because in the Christian faith, we have this example in Christ who is like, well, how do we live in this world then? And Jesus is this very weird figure, fully God, fully man, who comes into the world out of, we could even say, divine silence, divine protection, divine distance from all the chaos. And he comes in where it is loud, it is chaotic, it is noisy, it is disruptive, it is just all over the place. What do we do? Where do we go? They didn't have Twitter and X and Facebook back in the day, but I can only imagine, based on what the stories we have from the Gospels, of just people even using distraction of religiosity, distraction of politics, distraction of money, greed. Like, the distraction is still here. It's just different. And so in Christ, we actually have an example of, like, what does that look like for us to face and to deal with the distraction, even in the midst of all the chaos and stuff like that. So when we look at Jesus, some passages that we can visit are Luke 19:10 and Romans 10:13 through 15. So we've got, in Luke, Jesus himself says, like, I came to seek and save the lost. So right away, we should be queued up that if our tendency as Christians is to want to stiff arm and pull back, that's not what Jesus demanded. That's not what Jesus himself claimed he was here to do. So anytime we're like, no, sorry, too crazy, can't do it, like, that should be something that we're wary of, because that is not of who Christ said he was. And then in Romans, we have Paul writing to the Roman church. And he has this beautiful, like, string of logic, as Paul does, where he just says, Well, if you have good news and nobody hears good news, what happens? Nothing, because nobody knows. And so there's this power in when we tell the gospel, when we spread the word, when we say and we do all these things for the sake of preaching Jesus crucified, risen, and able to reconnect us in the Spirit to the Father. Like, we have the confidence to go into the noise and be like, don't you guys want to hear like an actually good signal? Don't you want to hear a good thing? Don't you want to hear something that's going to give you peace? Don't you want something that's going to ease your terror? Don't you want something that's going to make you feel like you matter in a world that says you don't? Whatever it is that is telling you don't matter. And so if Jesus came to be present, and Jesus also came so that we have news to tell, we should be telling it. And we should be out there telling it. And we should be thinking of creative ways to tell it and to relate and to connect with others, to deepen relationships. So I'm going to pass it off to Femi because I think we've had a slide issue, but here you go.
All right, so first of all, look at that art, it's nice. So one of the things in Signal in the Noise, again, going to the theme, we're talking about the signal that we have. We have the true message of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the good news that he has come to bring us in community with the Father forever, that he purchased that by his blood. And that is one story that we have that is amazing. It is beautiful, we can hold on to it, we grip it, and it can control and shape us and grow us and develop us for the rest of our lives. However, it's competing now with all of the stories of today. It is our extra news, evangelion, this beautiful statement of who is the king, and we are now competing against, this is how you can get abs by the end of May. This is how to make sure that everybody loves your Thanksgiving. This is how to make sure that you are going to make more money in the next 5 years than everybody else you're competing with. These messages are now the thing that we are competing against when we're saying, hey, this God is going to tell you about the worst things about you, right? Remember the woman at the well, right? Come see a man who told me everything I ever did, right? He's going to point out the flaws. He's going to say, I fixed the flaws. I'm going to take the flaws. I will take them upon myself. I will die for you. Now I have to compete with, this is how to make sure your legs look as good as you want them in the next 3 months. P90X, how you should compete in whatever competition it is. That's what we're competing with. And what Jesus uses primarily in his teaching is stories, right? You can go ahead and do the next one. Paul is the other person that we think about. I'm not going to read this entire quote just for time, but this is from Paul's message on Mars Hill, or the Areopagus. He sees that there's a statue to an unknown God, and he says, oh, I see you have a statue to an unknown God, right? I'm going to use your context. I'm going to use what you already think about, and I'm going to turn it. I'm going to change it and say, that will be my sticking point on how I communicate to you. Jesus is going to use parables about farmers. He's going to use stories about bread. He's going to use his job, his old job as a woodworker, turning dead things into useful things. Paul's taking, oh, I see where you're talking. I see what you're worshiping. Let me take that and twist it so I can tell you about the good news of Jesus Christ. This is how we think we can use story. Back to how we normally think, like, let's avoid it all at all costs. We're taking and saying, instead of avoiding it, how about we take it and see how we can use it? And also, instead of talking about just what's good when you turn it off, of like, it's good if you don't watch too much news, don't watch too much TV. If you don't watch too much news, if you don't watch too much TV, you can hang out with your friends. You can have a barbecue. You can plan a menu and invite your friends over. You can plan to have hot chocolate, cocoa, apple cider in the fall. You can have a really good spring Easter event. But that's because you get your head out of your phone, and we're not telling you that that's the goal. The pinnacle is not the asceticism. The pinnacle is what you do when you have the discipline in peace, when you have the identity set. And we take stories, like Jesus did with parables, we take the news, we take the gods of today, and we twist them. We go ahead and go to the next slide. And here are some of the gods that we think that we have today to use and have at our disposal. And the first is we have the far, on the far left, I'm trying to think of stage right, stage left. On the far left, we have all of the social media applications. We have romance and love. This is really great for middle schoolers, even sometimes third graders, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I gotta find a boyfriend or a girlfriend. I love this. I need to feel like somebody loves me that's just not my family who's forced to love me. Somebody chooses me and picks me and cherishes me, even though they don't know everything about me. The entire onslaught of Paramount Plus, Disney Plus, Netflix, Hulu, ESPN, right? I can watch things forever. I think you can look at the data, but there is more information created for consumption every single second than existed at all times in all books hundreds of years ago. It's so much information. What does my life look like, right? Is my life, we go on vacations, I have a promotion every other year, I get to enjoy all these things all the time. That's another God that people are searching for. And then on the far right is fitness. If you look today, and people make fun of it, what's your best workout? Is it strength? Is it cardio? Is it mobility? Is it flexibility? Should you be eating the carnivore diet? Should you be eating a vegetarian diet? Should you be eating a vegan diet? Should you be eating a plant-based diet? Should you be having these protein supplements or these protein supplements? Should you be taking these vitamins or these vitamins? Who is wrong? Who is smart? Who is dumb? All of these things are the gods that we worship today. If I go online on anybody's phone, anybody's YouTube feed, I'm gonna see this, whether you want me to or not. Right? And take no in mind that, like, we talk about sports sometimes, talk about other movies already. That's some of this already, right? If I know enough about sports, right, I might be able to make enough money. I might get a girl to like me, right? If I know enough about these things, people are going to think I'm smart and think I'm competent. I can network better. It still fits in here of what type of life you lead, what type of life you get to live. But these are the things we worship. The reason why we focus on story, like Paul, like Jesus is on the next slide, if we focus on those two, or the animation, I guess, right? If we focus on these two, we think that there's a lot more opportunity here for you, as somebody who's just living your daily life, to go through and turn these to a message about Christ than the others, right? I think it's a lot easier to take the things people are seeing as stories in social media, and stories in movies, TV shows, even some books, yes, and turn those, twist those and go, this is what I actually see here. This is what I'm hearing. This is whether or not I agree, and then having that conversation. Yeah, stories transcend all of these different barriers that we have. That's awesome. It's funny, even secular people will use Samaritan laws, and we have Good Samaritan laws. Straight up, wow, you know, that's cool. So we're gonna skip forward ahead because we have some clips we want to go through and do as a group, as tables. But one of the things we wanted to sort of wrap up with is, what is a better way to find the signal in the noise? So we talked about how Christians typically decide to use asceticism and avoid things with discipline, right? And we miss out on the benefits of one. What is the good that thing can be used for? A kitchen knife was the example. A military group could be another example, how they can protect people, not just hurt people. But the other thing is all the things and the benefits that we get of time with friends, time with family, when we go too hard on that. This passage is the context around why we beat our body, right? And why discipline is important. So I'm just going to read it. Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the weak I became weak to win the weak. I have become all things to all people so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. And that's where I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, that after I've preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. It's not about our individual prize. We don't partake in discipline or putting Bible as foundation just for ourselves. We don't try to avoid sin so God can look at us and go, well, you tried to avoid sin. We try to avoid sin because of the beauty of being able to then have that relationship with Christ impact how we see everything and help pull people to the beauty of who he is, right? To pull us to reconcile with each other when we have an issue. Story can do that in a way that transcends, and if we practice it, right, with each other, it will help us through generations, it'll help us through culture, it'll help us in so many different ways that me just putting out Bible verses for you in today's culture, I might as well be just making a post per verse, right? I'm just competing with the noise. We want to help people find the signal in the noise, and the signal is the thing that will change their entire life.